Hi, today we're going to learn how to make a simple multiplayer Pong game, which is going to look something like this. We have two players and they're both trying to hit the ball back and forth. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is choose a sprite and search for paddle, which is going to be what our player controls. So I'm going to name it player 1. And I want it to be vertical instead of horizontal, so I'm going to change the direction to 0. Now since it's a multiplayer game, we're going to need another one for player 2, so I'm going to duplicate this. So we want the players to be on the left and right end of the screen. So let's move player 1 to the left end of the screen and player 2 to the right end of the screen. So we go to player 1 and we're going to go to go to and we're going to set it to x negative 225 and y equals 0. And that's going to move it to the left end of the screen. We're going to do the same with player 2, but instead we're going to move it to x 225, positive 225, and that's going to move it to the right end of the screen. Now that we have positioned both the players, let's move them up and down. We're going to move player 1 up and down using the W and S keys. So let's put that in. So if the W key is pressed, we want the player to move 10 steps in the direction that he's facing. So since he's facing up, he's going to move 10 steps up. And since we wanted to move down when the S key is pressed, we're going to move negative 10, so now it's going to move downwards. We're going to do the same thing with player 2, but instead of using W and S to move up and down, we'll use the up and down arrow keys. So now both players can move up and down. Now it's time to create the ball. So I'm going to choose a sprite and look for ball. I'm going to make the size a bit smaller, so there, that seems nice. And so when the game begins, we want the ball to go in the center of the screen, so it's going to go to x0, y0. And when it begins, we want it to move towards player 1 first, and then player 1 is going to hit it, and then it's going to move to player 2. So since it's going to start moving towards player 1 first, we're going to point in direction of player 1, and player 1 is on the left, so we're going to point in direction negative 90. So now we want the ball to always keep moving, so we're going to put a forever loop, and in that we're going to have a move block, and we can change the value. So I'm going to start it off at 7, but we can see if that's too slow or too fast, and then we can change it around. But now what we want is if the ball touches player 1, which means player 1 hits the ball, we want it to start moving towards player 2, and likewise. So essentially what we want is if the ball touches either player, we want the ball to switch its direction. So let's put that statement in the code. So here is that statement. So if the ball touches either player, we want it to switch direction. So what we're going to do is go to motion and drag the point in direction block. We want the ball to be pointing in the opposite direction. So we're going to do that by multiplying our current direction by negative 1 and then putting that inside the point in direction block. So as you can see, the ball, when it touches either player, it switches directions, which is good. However, you can see it just keeps moving horizontally. What we want to do is allow the ball to travel diagonally so that each player has to keep moving up and down to actually get to the ball. So we're going to do that by bringing in a turn block. So each time a player hits the ball isn't just going to go horizontally, but it's going to go at an angle. And that angle is going to range from negative 20 to positive 20. And you guys can change these values around. Another thing we want to do is add the if on edge bounce block. So what happens is if the ball touches the top edge or the bottom edge, it's going to bounce instead of just staying there. So let's see that happen. Now we can see the ball does travel diagonally, and if it does touch an edge, it's going to bounce. We also need to add score so we know who's winning. But before we do that, we need to create a mechanism to detect if a player has won the point. For player 1 to win a point, which is the player on the left, For him to win a point, player 2 has to miss the ball. And for player 2 to miss the ball, what that really means is that the ball goes behind player 2 on its right side. So what we can do is create an if statement that checks if the x coordinate of the ball is greater than the x coordinate of player 2. That means that player 2 has missed the ball. So let's put that in code. So here we have that statement. If the x position of the ball is greater than 225, which is the x position of player 2, we know that player 1 has won the point. Now let's do the same for player 2. For player 2 to win the point, player 1 has to miss the ball. And what that really means is that the ball is behind player 1. And we can check that by seeing the x coordinate of the ball. If the x coordinate of the ball is less than the x coordinate of player 1, that means player 1 has missed the ball. So let's also put that in code. So here we have that. So if the x position of the ball is less than negative 225, which is the x position of player 1, then player 2 has won the point. So now let's create our two score variables. Player 1 score and player 2 score. I'll move the player 2 scored above player 2 and I'll make it a large readout. Okay, so for this first if statement, if the x position is greater than 225, we know that player 1 has won the point. So let's change player 1 score by 1. And likewise, we can do the same over here and change player 2's score by 1 if the x coordinate of the ball is less than negative 225. Now what we want to do is every time the game starts, we want the scores to start off at 0. So let's do that as well. So another thing that we want to add is anytime a player wins a point, we want to reset the game and bring the ball back to the middle. So we're going to begin by, whenever a player wins a point, we're going to hide the ball. Then we're going to bring the ball back to the center. So when x equals 0 and y equals 0, that's the center. And then what we're going to also do is point the ball in direction towards player 1, so in the direction of negative 90 degrees. Then we're going to show the ball. And then we're also going to add a wait block because we don't want the next round to begin right away. We'll give the players a second to get back to the middle. So we're going to put this code in both these if statements. And another thing that we want to do is bring these move 7 steps inside this forever loop because we don't want the ball to be moving when the game is being reset. And now this should work. So let's have a look. Perfect. So let's see, the ball goes back to the middle and now it's going to start. Perfect. So another thing we want to do is when either player reaches a score of 5, we're going to end the game. But of course you could also make it 10, 15 or whatever you like. So let's put that in code. So here we have that if statement. If player 1's score equals 5 or player 2's score equals 5, we're going to end the game. So we're going to go to control and then grab the stop all block. And now this is going to end the game. So we'll put this if statement inside this forever loop. And now anytime each of the players reaches a score of 5, the game is going to end. And that's it for this tutorial. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below.